Welcome to Creepy Loop, where shadows whisper and mysteries unfold. Today, embark on a spine-chilling journey with our tale Zayton-Adaz, City of Shadows. Join Azar as he unravels secrets, battles demons, and faces the horrifying destiny of a forgotten city. Let the darkness embrace you. A long time ago, I heard a cool story when I was in the desert with possibilities. It was just the dangers you fear set up camp near the other places of your imagination. At night, if they are real, then it's easier for them to harm you if you don't know what they are. I asked my guide if he knew any good desert stories, and he nodded with his anything to protect you. He started telling an old story not many within the safe confines of your own home ages ago in a city to defend yourself. Right in the middle of his desert. Diane, the city was super old and huge. If the dangers are just in your imaginations, that if you stand aside and face those fears, the streets were lively, filled with merchants calling out in their faces, playing, and they'll disappear. And scribes doing their thing. Either way, it's better to face the things that scare you than to give into the buildings. Mostly showing the golden front. Diane woke up late at night to find that her parents had statues at the gates and temple corners. And big fountains sprayed water into the air in each part of the city was hiding under her bed. In the middle of all the roads was the Tower of the Moon, reaching into the sky, paralyzed with terror until morning. At its base was the even running her bed because she was too scared to get up and go to the bathroom. It was like the heart of Zayton-Adaz. That night, though, she tall and strong woman surrounded the whole city in a nearly perfect circle. She decided to reach across the gap between her bed and her nightstand and turn on the bedside lamp. Just before the sun bravely sat up in bed, which was a young hunter named Azar would climb onto his roof to watch a special event in the city, and quickly lunged over to her nightstand. Everything in the city stopped. Nothing grabbed her. The streets were empty, warm light spread across her houses stayed quiet. Diane was surprised and happy that nothing bad happened. There was a faint but unmistakable sign of something with the light on and probably sleep fine. Everyone in Zayton-Adaz claimed they could hear it. That didn't really solve the problem. The locked doors of the great crypt opened. Big girls didn't sleep with the lights on. A big stone box parents always turned it off. In the black sun, symbols grandma said to face her fears, while everyone else in their homes. As her crouched on his roof by this little victory, the priest the only chance Diane had to muster the courage to do it. The ceremony had been happening for 5 years. Diane got a small flashlight that the city was protected by a goddess and turned the lamp off again. According to the legend, in the darkness, a day would come when a demon would try to destroy the city. Under the bed seemed to return immediately. The goddess was supposed to appear, get rid of the demon, and bring a golden age to Zayton-Adaz. With a loud, high-pitched demon had come to inspire the goddess hadn't, and alert her parents that if anything used ancient magic to kill the demon from the safe bed onto the floor. They took her heart out, belly, but a new body started growing around it and pointed it under the bed. They couldn't destroy it. No monsters. So they put it in the deepest part of just a couple of dirty socks and a toy ball she thought she'd lost. Every month, when the demon was almost back to stormed into the room to see what was wrong. They found their daughter lying on her body in the stone box and took it to the pit of Zagas, which was believed to be the entrance to the underworld, as if she was the happiest body into it. Box and all, the nightly terrors went away from the city until the goddess came to finish off the demon for good. Diane's grandmother bought her music box. This was the golden age, saying that the song was to whistle a happy tune from the king, and Azar disagreed. Now, running away from the monster she tried to tell everyone. Diane chose her grandmother's music box as her special talisman. That the prophecy must be followed. It represented conquering her fears until the goddess destroyed the nightstand next to her bed. The true golden age would sometimes. She played it for the goddess to appear. The demon must be set free upon the world. With a deep sense of relief, his friends laughed at him at first, then tried to change his mind. Turn it over in her hands. When that didn't work, then she turned their backs on the unmistakable creak of a floorboard correctly behind her. Said the so-called golden age was fake. It was almost undeniable. The city for years and saw it starting to decay. Diane drew her breath, started feeling a rush of adrenaline. The urge to turn around became almost unbearable. Under the banner of the black sun, an unbidden thought rose from deep in her mind. Had lots of servants. This is your last chance. Had more power than anyone else. Your last chance to face your fear. People said they were stealing from the city's vaults. That was silly. And taking young women for themselves. Diane closed her eyes, ignoring her tried to stop their grandmother's advice, and turned the music box over and no money left. Lots of crimes, and everyone acting bad. Resident. But the people in the city thought things were great because they didn't want to believe what was really happening. Kanayo resident. On the days when they did the demon killing ceremony, a sound like a door sliding open or shut, and the priest showed off how powerful they were. Kianayo resident. They put the demon's heart on display for an hour, and it would slowly start beating again. Diane opened her eyes. People could look at it, down the music box, they were kicked out and turned the next ceremony. Behind her was Azur watched it every time, quiet, feeling like familiar voice asking for help. No monsters. One day, strange decided to do something about it. No unseen presences. He wanted to set the demon free. A profound sense of relief, and he spent a month planning how to do it. She was home, safe and secure. The ceremony, and her pursuer was finally gone. The doors were sealed tight. She practically skipped back down the steps to lock her front door. How long would it take for the demon to wake up? After that, she fixed herself a glass of warm milk in the kitchen before Azur knew the priest's route to the pit of Saga. Ready to sleep, where they thought the demon felt a slight sense of tension. There was a big boulder along the way, nothing compared to what she just experienced. He got everything would be better in the morning, practicing what told her so. Diane had always felt safest at home, saying they were for the greater good. She snuggled the next day. The ceremony rested her head on her shoulder. Had been hiding behind a big boulder since the day before. Much needed sleep. He wasn't scared of being caught because Diane woke up from a deep sleep, feeling uncomfortable and with a dry mouth. The city got really quiet. She slowly became aware. Was quite far from the city. The sound of her grandmother's music could still hear the ceremony starting. Tune. After all these years, the tune made her feel happy when the high priest served her at the stone box, wondering how the music box could be playing. Knowing when they would realize someone must have wound it right on time. That thought snapped her into the other side of the boulder. She tried to say it, but found herself restricted, so he was behind them when he got to her wrists and ankles. He saw the priest walking slowly ahead, to cry out, not discovering she was gagged. He pulled back his bow and aimed for the priest farthest away on the far right bedposts. His arrow hit the priest in the back of the sliding against the other, sent her into a deeper panic because one side of the stone struggled against her arm being held up, making muffled noises. Azur quickly shot another arrow at the priest on the back right, and he spoke casually. The stone box tipped to the right, the lid loosened, the heavy sleep fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Didn't even flinch when I was tying you down. Yet a loud music distant priests had noticed Azur and were coming at him with their masculine voice seemed oddly familiar and spoke as if having a regular conversation. Azur shot an arrow in the situation even more disturbing. The last priest charged, Diane continued and Azur struggled as the voice mentioned stepping on a creaky floorboard. The priest was almost on she would turn so around. Azur quickly shot another arrow. The voice chuckled this time he missed and the sound of grinding metal. The man was right there, swinging his sharp blade toward Azur's head. No worries. Kiddo. Azur used his bow to block ghosts or monsters are chasing you through some thick wood and stabbed into Azur's shoulder. Nobody's trying to snatch your soul away. He screamed in pain, and blood started soaking the sand. Probably just your imagination. Azur thought the priest would finish him off, but those footsteps after you left the bar. Azur raised his head and Diane's captor slowly came into her view. It had been a while since he had to move so fast. His friendly smile. Azur took his chance, mocking the sword away. Pulled the man down, sharp butcher knife, him until he stopped moving. With a nasty laugh, Azur stood up, panicking and trying to catch his breath. Killing the other priests was different. It was like he had the arrows on his side. But this time, he murdered in cold blood, and he felt like his soul was in trouble. After a moment of freaking out, he remembered his goal. He thought that if he brought the true golden age, maybe he could be redeemed. He went to the fallen stone box, its lid on the ground. He was ready to see something horrible inside. When he looked, it wasn't what he expected. It terrified him more than anything else on earth. After staring for a while, he carefully put the contents in a big sack, lifted it painfully over his good shoulder, and ran back to Zayt-Nadaz. Azur hid in a dark alley for hours with the sack he took from the stone box. It felt like forever. When he saw the sun right above him, he knew it was time. The priests wouldn't be suspicious at first because Azur was always there during the heart display. His plan to get the heart had been tricky, but all that waiting made him really mad. He didn't want to wait a second longer. He heard a loud crack, and he knew the doors of the great crypt had opened. He threw the sack over his shoulder and walked toward the crypt. When he got there, he saw a priest opening the doors. The priest smiled when he saw Azur because they knew him from every new moon. But the smile faded when he saw the sack over Azur's shoulder. Azur reached the doors and pushed the left one hard, hitting the priest, who fell and held his face. The other priest complained, so Azur swung the sack, hitting the man in the face, and he fell too. Inside the crypt, there were tall statues, and sunlight came in through small windows. Azur walked to the center where there was a big altar. 2 priests were there, each with a blade. When they heard the noise from the entrance, they got ready to fight. Azur let the sack fall to the floor. The priests charged at him, but Azur was ready. He knew they couldn't aim well and weren't strong. He grabbed the wrist of the first priest, made him drop his blade, and pushed him into the second priest. They fell and screamed. Azur was so mad that he didn't care if the second man's blade hurt them. Azur stepped past the 2 men on the floor and went to the big altar in the middle of the room. The light from the windows made the golden altar look really bright, but what Azur wanted was the dull lump of flesh on top of it. He shivered as he picked the heart up. It was beating slowly and quietly. Azur closed his eyes and started praying silently. Before he could finish, someone grabbed his hurt shoulder from behind. His arm hurt a lot as he was spun around. When he opened his eyes, he saw a big man in leather armor with the symbol of the Black Sun. Azur didn't have much time to react before the man punched him in the face, and everything went black. Azur woke up in a strange room. He was in a heavy wooden chair and didn't seem tied up. In front of him was a tall stand with a dim torch. The light made strange shadows on the walls, where there were creepy paintings. The figures in the paintings looked twisted and scary in the dim light. The floor had a carpet made from animal hides he didn't know. After a few seconds, he heard a door open behind him. Someone with soft footsteps came close, and a low voice spoke. "I thought my personal study would give us more privacy than the dungeon cells," the voice said. A tall man in the same Black Sun armor walked in front of him. He turned and stood between Azur and the torch, so Azur couldn't see his face except for flashing blue eyes. "Let me introduce myself," said the man. "I'm Sukez, head of the Guardians of the Priesthood. You probably haven't heard of us. We like to keep it that way. It makes our jobs easier." As Azur's head cleared, his anger came back stronger than before. "What did you do?" Azur growled. "I didn't do anything," Sukez said. "You, on the other hand, committed murder, scared the city, and messed up years of hard work." "You know what I mean," Azur said angrily. "What was that?" He could see Sukez grinning at him in the dim light. "Ah," said Sukez. "You're talking about what was in the sarcophagus. But you don't need me to tell you. You knew the moment you saw it, whether you want to believe it or not." Azur remembered when he looked into the stone coffin hours before. There was a dead woman inside, not a demon. She was tall, pretty, and royal. A faint light made her skin shine, lighting up the sarcophagus. Azur spoke slowly and angrily. "You killed a god." "Yes, many times," said Sukez. Azur jumped up from the chair and tried to grab Sukez's throat. But as soon as he stood, Sukez hit him in the jaw, and he fell back on the chair, feeling blood and realizing 2 teeth were missing. "Don't think you can kill me as easily as some high priests, kid. You've been lucky so far, but it won't happen again." Azur sat back up in the chair, glaring at Sukez, tears welling up in his eyes. "How can you do such a thing?" Azur asked, his voice almost breaking. "To be fair," said Sukez, sounding annoyingly superior, "I never killed her myself. You can thank your fancy priests for that. And the reason they did it is the same thing that drives all people." "What's that?" "Fear," said Sukez. 5 years ago, the high priests got really proud and greedy. They gathered power, made the guardians, and stole from the city. Then she showed up, the goddess they claimed to serve. On that day, those once righteous men were more scared of judgment than anything. I'm not sure who did it, but before she could speak, a priest stabbed her through the heart. They saw the blood go back, and the wound started healing. They were afraid of being judged for their pride, and now they were terrified for killing a goddess. And so, the cycle started. 5 years, Azur said. 5 years. How many times has it happened? How many bodies thrown into the pit? Why do they let this keep going? He thought someone outside would hear him yell, but Sukkis just stood there, letting him talk. When Azur finally stopped, Sukkis laughed. Your people are cowards, said Sukkis. They can't face what's right in front of them. The city could be on fire, and they wouldn't even notice. The city is on fire, yelled Azur. And you know it. How do you let this happen every day? Because maybe the world would be better without it, said Sukkis. The oasis city is dead and rotting. It needs to be cut off like a sick limb. Sukkis' tone changed as he said those words. His voice echoed in the room, and Azur's anger started to fade. Fear took its place. Who are you? Azur asked, speaking in a whisper. Sukkis crossed his arms and looked up, as if finding the right words. After a few seconds, he circled the torch in the middle of the room, stopping on the side opposite Azur. When he turned back, Azur finally saw Sukkis' face. It looked normal, with short dark hair and a thin pointed beard. But Azur noticed the shadow behind him. Even though Sukkis was just a bit taller than Azur, the shadow was huge. It had horns on its head and massive wings stretching across the wall in darkness. Sukkis saw Azur's wide eyes, grinned, and circled back to the front of the torch. I'm someone way above the people in this city, said Sukkis. You're the demon, Azur said. The legendary demon. Sukkis chuckled, and the sound echoed off the walls. Demon? No, said Sukkis, shaking his head. I like to think of myself as more of an angel, with a very specific purpose. Destruction, said Azur. Change, said Sukkis. Nothing lasts forever in this world. Trying to make it last is foolish. He moved closer to Azur, who cowered in his seat. All people die, all cities fall apart, and all empires crumble. It's the natural order. Your city, your goddess, and your people go against nature itself. It wasn't just the priests, right? Asked Azur, finding a bit of courage. That depends, said Sukkis, sounding superior again. I might have started their corruption, made them doubt their beliefs, and planted their fear of the goddess. But I didn't use the blade, and I haven't touched her. You won't get away with this, Azur said, his voice confident again. I won't let you. The goddess will live again. Sukkis tilted his head and looked at Azur with a question in his eyes. Very well, said Sukkis. You're free to go. Azur was surprised, his jaw dropping and a confused look on his face. Really? Asked Azur. You're not going to lock me up or kill me? Do you want me to? Sukkis asked. Azur stared back silently. No, my friend, said Sukkis. I won't kill you. My job is to bring ruin. Maybe your job is to bring ruin to me. Who am I to mess with fate? Go. Still looking at Sukkis, Azur slowly stood up from the chair. With a lot of fear, he turned his back on Sukkis and went toward the door behind him. However, said Sukkis, you might not want to go through with this. Azur stopped 2 steps from the door, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. He didn't want to hear what the demon had to say, but something made him turn around. What do you mean by that? Asked Azur. Sukkis had moved to the other side of the torch in the middle of the room. The huge shadow was visible again on the far wall. Azur walked to the torch, glaring at Sukkis from across. I just mean that if you do this, things might be worse than you think. What seems right might not be. Don't try to trick me, said Azur. You can't see the future. Maybe not, said Sukkis. But I've watched this world for a long time and I'm good at guessing what might happen. Want to see the future? For the first time, doubt crept into Azur's mind. He tried to remind himself that the demon was trying to fool him, but doubt grew. Azur couldn't resist. Okay, demon, said Azur. What can you tell me about my quest? Sukkis grinned even more. I prefer to show you, said Sukkis. He waved a hand over the torch, and it went out. Fear gripped Azur as darkness surrounded him. Then, a light appeared from above. Azur looked up and saw the moon high overhead. Looking back down, he saw a forest in front of him. He heard Sukkis clear his throat behind him and spun around. Azur was on a high ridge, looking down at Zayt-Nadaz from miles away. Sukkis stood on the very edge. "What will happen when the goddess lives again?" asked Sukkis. "Isn't it possible her wrath will be great?" Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the sky over the city. A huge glowing orb hung ominously. "Isn't it possible the city will pay the price?" The orb descended in a second, hitting the center of the city. A flash of light made Azur cover his eyes. When he looked again, more orbs appeared, descending on the city. Azur forced himself to look, seeing blast after blast tear the city apart. Houses flew into the air, statues turned to dust, and the tower of the moon shattered and fell. "But why stop there?" asked Sukkis. "Won't her anger be enough to punish all the people in the world?" The whole sky lit up with massive orbs, moving towards far eastern cities and coastal cities in the north. "Would you let the whole world burn for your hope?" The nearest orb in the sky started to come down straight toward Azur. In seconds, light surrounded him, and he couldn't see anything. Azur closed his eyes, trying to ignore the vision before him. "That will never happen," said Azur. "Our goddess is kind and fair. She wouldn't punish those who didn't hurt her." His voice sounded sure, but doubt grew in his mind. After a moment, Sukkis spoke through the light. "Maybe," he said. "So let's say you're right, and your goddess isn't angry. Let's say your golden age comes after I'm gone." The light dimmed, and Azur slowly opened his eyes. He was in a damaged city. Tall wooden houses burned, and the air was thick with smoke. Ash covered the streets. Sukkis still stood in front of him on the broken road. "Where are we now?" asked Azur. Sukkis shrugged. "One of the eastern cities," he said. "Stead or Lasaria or home, one of those. I can't remember." Sukkis bent down and picked up a handful of ash, letting it drift away in the hot wind. "Your golden age comes, but your city's pride doesn't go away. It only grows." Sukkis turned and walked up the road, stepping over burning debris. Azur hurried after him, sinking his feet into the hot ash, wondering where all the people were. Maybe the vision wasn't finished. "They start to think they're better than everyone else," said Sukkis. "Ruled by a living god, they believe they have the right to rule over other cities. The armies of Zayt-Nadaz march on them, burning everything to the ground." Finally, they reached a big courtyard. Azur moved ahead and saw the paved area torn apart with deep pits dug into the earth. Approaching one, he realized it wasn't a pit but a mass grave. 100 charred skeletons filled it to the brim. In the center of the courtyard, he saw movement, and as the smoke cleared, a banner appeared, bloodied and torn, with the symbol of the black sun still visible. "What once inspired faith will now only instill fear," said Sukkis. Rage boiled up inside Azur, but he wasn't sure where to direct it. Was it at the people of this future? Sukkis? Himself? "No," screamed Azur. "The people of Zayt-Nadaz would never do this. I've lived there my whole life, and I've always believed they are good people." "You still believe that after knowing what has happened for 5 years?" asked Sukkis. "Your naivety is amusing, I must say. Even if our leaders have become corrupt, the people won't," said Azur. Sukkis smirked and shook his head. "So, let's assume you're right," said Sukkis. "Your people are faultless, spending their golden age doing wholesome, peaceful things." Azur struggled to stay calm in response to Sukkis' mocking tone. "Do you trust the people of the surrounding cities just as much?" As Sukkis spoke, the city around them blurred and changed. The sound of flames died down, replaced by metal striking metal. "The people of the surrounding cities see your great wealth and power," said Sukkis. "As always, they're filled with envy and fear. They'll try to crush you. As the scene stopped shifting, Azur and Sukkis stood in the market quarter of Satan Adas, beneath one of the great fountains. The waters ran red. Around them, soldiers fought madly. Satan Adas guards were outnumbered and outmatched, struggling on as more fell each second. The attacking soldiers had various sigils on their armor. "They will succeed," said Sukkis. He signaled for Azur to look behind him. Azur did, and saw the goddess's body once again, heart removed and head gone. The streets of the oasis city were filled with death. Azur fell to his knees, closing his eyes and burying his face in his hands. The noise around him fell silent. When he looked up, he found himself in Sukkis' study once again, the torch shining dimly. Azur felt his head spinning. Sukkis stood over him, arms crossed, awaiting a response. Azur met his gaze, glaring back into the bright blue eyes. He rose to his feet and took a deep breath. "So," said Sukkis, "what is your course of action now?" It was almost a minute before Azur replied. "I believe in the goddess," said Azur. "I believe in the city of Satan Adas. And I believe in all people. I will see your downfall, demon, no matter the cost." There was no trace of uncertainty in his voice. There was not even any rage. There was only a conviction that brought a look of shock to Sukkis' face. Azur shoved Sukkis away from him and went for the door. "Stop," said Sukkis. Azur sighed and waited, keeping his back to Sukkis. "Going to kill me now?" asked Azur. He heard Sukkis' footsteps approach his back. "No," said Sukkis. "I'm not going to be that kind." "Then what do you want?" asked Azur. He felt Sukkis' breath on the back of his neck. "You have seen what could happen," whispered Sukkis. "But now you must know what will happen." Azur remained silent. "I gave you a chance. A chance to stop your fool's crusade and live out your days in peace. The same way I gave your priests a chance to save themselves and repent. But they failed to take it, and now so have you. I will not listen to more of your lies, demon." "Then listen to the truth," said Sukkis, his voice raising. "You will go and tell the people of me and your high priests. And do you know what they will do? They will call you mad and heretic. And they will take you and lock you away in the Tower of the Moon in a tiny cell with one tiny window. And every new moon you will look out that window and wonder if it is finally the day that the high priests break the cycle and release your precious goddess. And that day will never come." Azur closed his eyes and focused his thoughts inward, ignoring Sukkis, whose voice rose with every word. "You will watch your city travel the road to destruction. You will live out your life in that cell waiting for the day to come. And on your deathbed, you will finally know that that day will never come." Sukkis grabbed Azur by the shoulder and spun him around, screaming directly into his face. "Where will your faith be then?" Sukkis finally fell silent. Azur reached up and removed his hand from his shoulder. He looked back into the demon's eyes and smiled. "The same place it has always been," said Azur. Sukkis glared back and returned the smile. "You think you will be rewarded in death as a martyr," said Sukkis. "But you do not know the truth. She is not a goddess. She is Satan Adas, the very soul of the oasis city. With every day of slaying, the city decays, brick by brick. And when enough bodies have been cast into the pit, your precious city will collapse under the weight of its own pride. You'll have no deity to put faith in." Azur remained silent for a moment. When he spoke again, Sukkis heard something change. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "I have learned something here today, Sukkis," said Azur. "I thank you. I really do. Because if Satan Adas is only a city, then there is only one thing left to place my faith in. I believe in the people. And if this city does fall one day, the people will survive it, and you will know that you have failed. Where will your pride be then?" Sukkis said nothing as Azur turned and left the room at last. shook his thought quietly for a moment, and then smirked. "Good luck, man of faith," he said. "You will need it." The torch went out, and the room descended back into darkness. My guide stopped talking and began carving once again. I waited a minute for him to resume before speaking. "Well?" I asked. "What happened then?" He looked up at me and smiled. "There are no records that still remain from that ancient city," he said. I sighed and got up from the campfire. I grabbed a torch and stuck it into the fire. After lighting it, I walked toward the spring a short walk away from our camp. I kept talking as I walked away. "So do you think the place even existed?" I asked. "There are certain relics that have been found that supposedly come from the oasis city." I reached the spring, planted the torch into the earth beside me, and drank a handful of water. "And there are some that say that deep in the desert on cold and moonless nights, a strange man appears," said my guide. I was about to turn back to the campfire when I saw something out of place beneath the water. A strange man with flashing blue eyes. I pulled the torch out of the earth and raised it higher. "And they say that if you ask politely, he will tell you the tale." A large slab of stone lay at the bottom of the spring. The tale of the last man of faith in the great, ancient, and forgotten city of Zayton-Nadaz. On that stone slab beneath the clear waters, I could make out two symbols, a shining golden frond and a large black sun. I turned back toward the campfire to call my guide over to see, but when I looked back, I found that I was alone beneath that moonless night sky.